homer, led the league in tackles with 85. The deep ball for Darius Prince, and Philadelphia's on the board first.
On the draw, this is Bryson Allen. And Allen weaving his way all the way down to the 22.
10-yard line, 5. Mayfield, Dancy, all around. Throw it as far as he can throw it. Jump ball coming. Crazy stuff. Not this time.
And you want to be a wide receiver, you're going to have to take a little bit of a hit like that as Brown got him in that shoulder, but watch. Those are teeth.
Do we have a dentist on staff here?
All right, thank you for watching, and sorry about the delays. Obviously starting this show quite late compared to its normal kickoff time. But I was having some technical difficulties behind the scenes with my computer, got everything figured out, and now we can get going for the morning. So first of all, thank you for tuning in. If you are tuning in, super excited to be here with you today, and we'll have a guest joining us here soon to talk some IFL football. But obviously, as we do in every episode, we're going to go ahead and kick this stuff off with the National Arena League. Due to the merger that has happened with the American Indoor Football League this past offseason, the league has seen a lot of growth compared to what they finished the 2023 season with 5 teams. We're now back up to 10 teams, which I believe is the most for several years over the past couple or recent history. But one of the big announcements, is the fact that Shreveport Rouxgaroux are now officially a National Arena League team. Obviously, this is a very big deal for the state of Louisiana to get a team back. Obviously, they briefly had the Louisiana Voodoo last season, which seemed to have great support, but then ultimately ended up having to fold due to, the promises that were not fulfilled from the original group with the AFL. Hopefully that has been corrected and we get the Voodoo back. But for now, we definitely have another team that's coming to Shreveport. And the big piece of news that I took away from this was the fact that Patrick Pimmel has been hired as the head coach. We most recently saw Patrick Pimmel as the head coach of the Philadelphia Soul, again in the AFL. In fact, that was kind of the first card that fell in the house of cards that was the AFL this past season. So we saw Pimmel ultimately kind of raise the alarm out there in Philly after a while of footing the bill for his players and ultimately kind of paying for them to be housed and fed for a little while there out in Philly. Great coach, great man, know the guy well, have been talking to him for the better part of 3 seasons now. And I really think that he's a good person to have in there for a startup franchise like Shreveport right now. So super excited to see him get another opportunity as a head coach. Oh, how's it going, Cody?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. Just started up a little bit late, but I'm glad you're here with us. So let me just quickly finish my thought on the NAL, and then we'll go ahead and get into it. But basically, I was just saying, Patrick Pimmel, great coach. He was most recently with the Philadelphia Soul. Prior to that, he was the offensive coordinator and director of player personnel, I believe it was, for the Duke City Gladiators for last offseason, kind of helped build that roster a little bit and kind of poached some of their players going over to Philadelphia. But then he also previously had held positions with the Topeka Tropics and the Omaha Beef. So great talent recruiter, evaluator, and ultimately a great coach. And like I said, a great man as well. So definitely super excited to see him back into one of these leagues, albeit we weren't sure where he was going to end up. So congratulations to Pimmel. Glad to see him back. And we can go ahead and move on into the IFL awards. So Cody, how are you doing this morning? And are you ready to talk some IFL yearly awards?
Yeah, I'm down for it. I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I definitely cannot complain. It's been an interesting early Saturday morning so far.
Seems like it.
Definitely. But real quick before we get into the IFL action, I want to play a quick video that Cody cut for us.
In 2017, yes you, could have been the general manager of an indoor football team. I was. So was someone down the road, or in a different town, or a different state, or even a different country. The access to an app and play calling abilities and voting abilities, you were in charge of a very important team with lessons learned along the way. This is the history of the Salt Lake Screaming Eagles. They were gone, but not forgotten. Come join me as we take a look at a very mysterious team.
First of all, great promo. I love it.
Thank you.
This is for your upcoming Gone But Not Forgotten series. And you're going to be talking about the Screaming Eagles in the first episode?
Yeah, so I try to start out with a bang with something, dare I say, controversial, but something that actually, when you take a deeper dive into it, while Project Franchise and all of that stuff went their separate way with their, fan-controlled football, there were some lessons that I think the Indoor Football League as a whole kind of took and ran with, which, I mean, I'll dive deeper into that. I'm going to give you a little tease right there. But, yeah, we'll move on from them. Kind of wanted to start out with a bang, and then, like I said, I've got a couple of other teams down the pipeline that, whether it's the issues with, like, Spokane when they were a team, or Colorado, Cedar Rapids, kind of some teams that you like remember from the recent past, and even further back, teams in Alaska and stuff like that. I just want to touch on some of these teams that people were fans of, and you always hear people in comment sections going like, "You need to put a team in insert city. How come we don't have a team in Grand Rapids?" And this and that. Like, I'm trying to dive a little deep and to see why these teams burned these cities.
That's a great series, and I'm looking forward to checking out the videos. It looks like you're putting a lot of effort into it, considering that was a 30-second promo and it was very well produced. So looking forward to seeing the actual, full-length videos coming out. Any idea when we'll be able to see the first one?
Salt Lake one should be out by next week. I've got information, research, and stuff. Got the script and everything ready to go. Just narrating, putting the images and shorts together to make it all cohesive.
Very nice. Looking forward to it for sure. And then, like you said, Colorado coming up after that. That's obviously a big deal for me. And then, Cedar Rapids is going to be an interesting one. There's a lot of teams that I'm excited to see you kind of go over for sure. But enough about your videos that will be coming up. We can't give away all the information there, but obviously, this past couple weeks we've been seeing the IFL announce the yearly award winners. Pretty great list. I think there might be some controversy at the top, depending on how you look at it. I personally think they were trying to spread out the wealth, but real quick, I'm just going to run down the list, and we will get into it. We've got MVP Jerome Johnson, quarterback from Las Vegas. Sam Castronova is the Offensive Player of the Year for San Antonio. Defensive Player of the Year, Riverius Rivers from Green Bay. Special Teams Player of the Year, Gabriel Rui from Iowa. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Bryce Hampton from Vegas. Offensive Rookie of the Year, Josh Jones from Naz. Coach of the Year, Corey Roberson, Green Bay. And then Assistant Coach of the Year, David Moran. Love that last one. Really, really love the gesture that kind of shows from the league. But what are your immediate thoughts on, in my mind, what could be controversial is the MVP vote for Jerome Johnson, but Sam Castronova winning Offensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, so when I did my mid-season report card for the league, for the teams and stuff like that, and mid-season awards, I actually had these two flip-flopped just based on how it was going with the season and stuff like that. It really shows that the IFL is really putting more weight into if you make the playoffs. And also Jerome Johnson, let's not take away. He had a very great season. I think they took his running ability in, his running touchdowns and everything like that. Not to say Sam Castronova didn't, have rushing touchdowns or run the ball himself. His passing stats speak for themselves. But I think when you look at who is the most important player for their team, that's the question I've been asking, whether it's been on Twitter, whether it's been on my own channel, whatever it is. Is it the most important player to the league or the most important player to your team? And they're going for the league with Jerome Johnson making the playoffs. The season that Vegas has had, I personally would like Castronova, but I see why they did it. I had Castronova as the MVP at the midseason, but Jerome Johnson got a fire lit under his butt halfway through that second half of the season and put Vegas in the spot to really compete when it came to the playoffs.
I agree. I agree. That's exactly why I think there could be some controversy there, because realistically, you could make a case for Castronova to be the MVP and Jerome Johnson to be offensive or player of the year, due to both of their performances. I mean, obviously, I think we saw Castronova total over 100 touchdowns this season, which is insanity. And then at the same time, you have Jerome Johnson over here running for 30 some touchdowns and then throwing for 40 some touchdowns. So really interesting to see how they decided that one. And like you said, I think they're holding the playoff berth in with a lot of weight, as they should. I mean, I honestly believe that that's a good way to kind of separate the two in this particular case. But you do have to feel for Castronova there. A historical season, one I've never seen before, and I don't know if we'll ever see again, to be quite honest. But we'll see. I mean, I heard some rumblings that Castronova might be walking away. Hopefully that's not the case. He's way too good to just kind of walk away on that note. Personally, I would like to see him get an IFL ring at some point before he decides to ultimately hang it up. But I like the fact that they were able to get 3 quarterbacks on the list, because obviously all 3 of these men are very deserving of an award. You know, we talked about Jerome Johnson's performance, but Josh Jones, I mean, he was unbelievable as a rookie for Naz. Whatever it is that they're doing down there in Naz with rookie quarterbacks, they need to keep it up, because it seems like they continue to find talent every year. You know, first it was Caleb Barker, then last season was Garrett Kettle and a couple other guys. And now this season we see, ultimately Joshua Jones. So what are your thoughts on Josh Jones winning Offensive Rookie of the Year?
It's no surprise. I mean, they probably had a list of maybe 3 to 5 people. I don't know what goes on in the behind the scenes stuff, but far and away, Josh Jones just kind of blew everything out of the water when it came to the offensive player or offensive rookie of the year. Very good season, like you alluded to. Whatever Northern Arizona is doing out there when it comes to developing quarterbacks, developing players as a whole. I mean, you see what second and third year players are at Bay Area that played under Rob Keefe when he was at Northern Arizona, or wherever they go. Like Caleb Barker at Jacksonville was able to kind of put a little bit of a bow on Jacksonville's season there, to have them finish 5-11 or something like that, or 4-10. So whatever they're doing out there is great. Now to Josh Jones, he had a very, very good season. Dare I say, dark horse MVP season. I had him up there in the top 5 along with Max Myler and TJ Edwards. So he was there. He was definitely in that running. If he could have put up more numbers like Sam Castronova, I think he might have honestly fought for Offensive Player of the Year. But I mean, there's a reason why Castronova won it. It's because he threw for almost not threw, but almost had 100 total touchdowns. So that's where we're at.
Sorry about that. Too many tabs open. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, just an impressive season by Josh Jones. Comes out, throws 56 touchdowns in his rookie season, and looks like he's an indoor football veteran, which is hard to do. You know, it's a totally different game, and that's something that, you know, if you watch quarterbacks in particular, there always seems to be a little bit of an adaptation period before they get their feet underneath them and they look like they should. And Caleb Barker and the rest of these guys that we've been discussing for Naz have seemed to come out and look prepared right away out of the box. And that's a credit to the coaching down there. We all know Les Moss is one of the best. So, you know, good for him to continue to find this talent and ultimately be able to cultivate it and make it work on the field. But real quick, just wanted to touch on that point that you made with Caleb Barker in Jacksonville. He had an interesting run towards the end of the season. Like you said, they did end on 5-11. I think they won like 3 out of the last 4 games and almost beat Green Bay right before they went into the playoffs. So pretty solid run there for the end of the season. I had thought Caleb Barker was done for good. I wasn't sure if he would ever come back to the game. We see him come back. I wonder if he returns to Jacksonville next season. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, he's already resigned.
Really? I totally missed that. I'm glad to hear it. Big fan of his game, and I hope he decides to stick with the IFL or football in general for the next couple seasons. I know he's a new father, so that is something to weigh, obviously, but definitely hope to see him continue playing because he's a great player. Defensive rookie or defensive player of the year, I believe there's no controversy here personally. Riverius Rivers, I mean, ultimately had an unbelievable season, but what are your thoughts on him winning the award? And are there any candidates that stuck out to you that could have won it if it weren't for Rivers?
Only other one I had in my mind was Antoine Kincaid for Bay Area, just based on he had over 100 tackles. Excuse me. The tackles for loss that he had, he just didn't have the interception numbers. I mean, he wasn't necessarily a ball hawk, but he was the other type of defensive back. He was crowding that line, doing press coverage, and if you were running the ball to his side of the field, he was tackling you for a loss. I think Riverius Rivers probably gets the nod when it comes to Defensive Player of the Year because he was able to break up passes, drop into coverage, still get tackles for loss as well, and just kind of be an all-around menace when it came to the defensive secondary. So I don't see a controversy necessarily, but like I said, Antoine Kincaid could have an argument. I think it was Riverius Rivers for quite a while now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you lead the league in interceptions, it's kind of hard to say that there's anybody maybe more deserving, depending on who does what in the sack department. But this year it wasn't really anything crazy there. But 9 interceptions for Rivers, and then also 11 pass breakups. Essentially, he disrupted 20 passes from a defensive back's position. That's impressive as this can be. Definitely deserving of that award. And like you said, there are a couple other guys that could be named there, but realistically, it would have felt a little wrong if he hadn't won anything. And then Gabriel Rui, the ever faithful Gabriel Rui, wins Special Team Player of the Year. There's a couple other players that I thought might get some consideration, maybe mainly in the return game. Are you surprised to see them give this to a kicker this season?
No, I'm happy they did. Like I said, the last couple of years, and it's just kind of been a kick return, award. And now it's kind of hopefully turning back into a special teams player. Not to say that return men don't deserve it, but you did see kind of a drop off of kick return touchdowns. There were kick return touchdowns, but like I said, nothing that necessarily stood out. And the fact that Gabriel Rui was able to hit multiple deuces throughout the season, I don't think he did not lead the league in deuces, but he was probably top 5. And being able to make the field goals that he's been able to, being able to make the extra points and stuff. I try to put him up against other kickers like Axel Perez, who's known for drop kicks, and against other kickers like Kyle Kaplan or Dawson Evans. And those two guys just didn't really hit any deuces on the season. So they hit a couple, but not as much as Rui. So I think he was probably the right pick.
Yeah, definitely have to agree on that front. He's like I said, he's pretty clutch. I mean, almost one of the best, if not the best, in all of indoor football. Although there's quite a group of players there that you could argue are part of the top of the echelon there. But second in the league in overall field goal attempts. Made 20 field goals this season. That's no small feat indoors. I know he didn't make the most field goals, but his overall contributions as a kicker were very impressive. I personally thought you could have given, Elijah Lilly some consideration there, maybe Lionel McConnell in the return game as well. But ultimately, I can't argue against Rui winning this award. It's just there were some very impactful return man this year. Multiple guys had multiple touchdowns. Also, Jared Harrington from Quad City. Can't forget about him. But both of those guys, Lilly and Harrington, had 4 return touchdowns. I think McConnell had 3, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely could have been some consideration there. But again, happy to see a kicker get an award, and a very deserving kicker at that. Then we move on to Defensive Rookie of the Year. Was very excited to see this one in particular for my good buddy Evan over there, and a big fan of Coach Davis. You see the Vegas Nighthawks background, so obviously very excited to see them continue to develop and hopefully elevate this talent to the next level by the end of the year in 2025 here. So what are your thoughts on Bryce Hampton winning Defensive Rookie of the Year?
I don't necessarily have an issue with it. I think the stat was he was the second leader in interceptions with 8, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have an issue with it. I personally would have liked to see someone like Sean Mustin. I think the defensive line deserves a little bit of credit, but I understand, like you said way earlier in the thing, they're kind of spreading the love out. Do you want a defensive player and defensive rookie on the same defense? Doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. I understand it, but at the same time, I don't have an issue with it. I truly don't. I think there were some other candidates that were there that could make a case, just like with any of these. Bryce Hampton's probably the best pick to go to. He did come on very late in the season, which is really promising if he does re-sign with Vegas. So that could be something to look at in the future. And if he sticks around, it's pretty good for the Nighthawks defense.
Yeah, I would definitely think Vegas is definitely set up to be successful long term, assuming a lot of these guys come back. They're a very young team this season. I think surprised quite a few people. When you looked at their roster on paper, considering a lot of these guys were unknowns. But Coach Davis said it himself. He knew there was going to be some bumps on the road. He was probably hoping it didn't come in the playoffs, but it ultimately did. And he's probably banking a lot of these guys coming back and ultimately being, very important contributors for the 2025 season and beyond, so they can continue to hopefully compete for a championship game and hopefully get a home championship game, which would be interesting. I would really like to see how Vegas comes out and supports their team moving forward. We already talked about Josh Jones winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. We got Coach of the Year, Corey Roberson. So this is an interesting one. Anybody who follows us closely know that about 2 years ago, I wrote an article talking about how Corey Roberson should have been let go from Green Bay. Well, he wins Coach of the Year in 2024. Quite the change over 2 seasons, but kudos to him for being able to rebuild this team and identify quarterback talent. I know I've mentioned that before. In terms of Green Bay, because they had Max Maylor and then they also had Jerome Johnson. But this season in particular, I think, was important for Roberson because he walked away, or he let go of Jerome Johnson and still was able to start Max Maylor and find a lot of success this season. So I'm curious, do you believe that he was the most deserving coach? Were there any other candidates here that you thought could be voted in?
Only other person I would have thought would have been Mike Davis, but excuse me, Coach Roberson's the most deserving. 13-3 record, doing everything that he did, only retaining 6 players from last year to this year. Every year they've gotten better. I know he won it back in 2019, but since their kind of drop off since then, they've slowly progressed better and better. If I'm not mistaken, when I did their preseason preview, they'd gotten better, like 1 win per season. So to kind of just blow that out of the water, because I think last year they were 7-9 or 6-10 or something like that, to just completely like double the amount of wins that they've had, to go through, like you said, letting go of Jerome Johnson, keeping Max Myler, keeping the center quarterback connection with Trent Clark, and then obviously working with the defense, since he's a defensive minded quarterback, making them the #1 defense in the league. You see it right there with Ravarius Rivers being Defensive Player of the Year. Like he put in work as the head coach here, so I'm not surprised he is. Only other person I would have thought would have been Mike Davis with the success that Vegas has had, considering that they had not won more than 6 games, I believe, in the season. So that would be the only other one, but Roberson is very deserving of this.
Yeah, agreed. And like you said, only retaining 6 players and being able to find this much success is very impressive. He's definitely one of the better coaches in the league, and I stand corrected. So one thing that I thought was awesome, and I know I mentioned this in the lead up to this discussion, but the passing of the award to David Moran, as we all know, Coach Moran passed away during the season, and obviously that's a heavy subject and really tough to deal with for any team mid-year. But for him to get that award, I think that's incredible. So I think that was a great move by the league, and hopefully his family took something from that. But won't spend a lot of time on that, obviously. I mean, there isn't much to say. I don't think there was many other choices that they could have gone with due to that situation. But real quick before we get into the next subject, and I'm really curious to get your opinion on this one, I'm going to play a quick promo from one of our new partners.
Right now, Danye Lyons is still a monster at return, and he can make something magical happen here.
All right, if you're not aware, we have partnered with the A7FL Nevada division to kind of help them promote their winter event. If you're an athlete looking to stay in shape during the winter and be prepared for camp, A7FL is a good way to do it. It's a little bit extreme, as you can tell. These guys are playing no pads, tackle football, but there's a lot of great athletes in that league, and obviously big plays, as you just saw a kickoff return for a touchdown. The big question that I wanted to ask you, Cody, I'm sure you saw the tweet that came out from Fisher's Freight after the media event yesterday, and we'll go ahead and pull it up real quick. Here it is. Rumblings of maybe another team joining us in the league in 2025. First of all, I have an idea who this might be, but what are your thoughts when you see this from Fisher's Freight and then hear, the rumblings in the media day?
It tells me that Fargo's a no-go. I mean, simple as that. Who the mystery team is, I mean, you can probably enlighten me later, but I personally don't know. I mean, you'd have to go through ECHL teams and, kind of pick and choose who could possibly be going through there. But it kind of tells me that the lack of communication that Fargo / Bismarck / Dakota, whatever you want to call them, they just couldn't get the sponsorships or anything. They've just been kind of dead silent since Massachusetts and Sioux Falls played up there midway through the season. So it's good to see that they are still getting another expansion team, so that way they can go 2x2 as Commissioner Tryon has wanted to do. So that way they're not doing an uneven schedule. So I'm really genuinely excited to see who this new team is going to be.
Agreed. And, there's no clues here. I mean, the one thing he does say is the question was asked in relation to the Dakota Bucks, which obviously everybody's been asking that question. Everybody wants to know what's going on with Dakota or Bismarck, no matter what you want to call them. Are they coming back? Are they going to be able to come back? So far, we don't have a lot of information there. And it seems like nobody does, not even the league currently. But if you look at this first comment here, somebody mentions Nashville, Orlando, Albany, Stockton. Those last four are basically all AFL teams from what I understand. I mean, Nashville, Orlando, Albany were all in the league. Stockton, it sounds like they're probably headed that direction as well, given the West Coast presence for the AFL. Although there's a lot of Bay Area connections there with Stockton. I personally think that they should put some thought into the IFL as well. Playing against two other California teams would help travel. There's a pretty solid West Coast presence, but then at that point, do you leave Frisco in the East? How do you address that situation? Really minor issue there, but I think Stockton would be a nice addition to the IFL if they were able to make it work. But that's a lot to ask for any first season team, especially one that kind of popped up out of the middle of nowhere. Do you have any dream scenario you would like to see for that 18th team?
I mean, the dream one's to bring one down to Kansas City so I can actually attend games, but no, I'm just kidding. For me, I think it's either going to be somewhere close to Fisher's, since, when we talked to him, excuse me, when we talked to him in the interview, they do have a lot of teams in that central division, whether it's Kalamazoo, Fort Wayne, Cincinnati, what have you. They're all kind of really closely connected, but I don't really have a dream scenario. There are teams in the ECHL, whether it's like the Jacksonville Icemen. Well, you're not going to do Jacksonville because the Sharks are already there. The Tulsa Oilers hockey team. Well, you're not going to do another Tulsa team because Tulsa's already there. They have a brand new team in Lake Tahoe. but Lake Tahoe has affiliations with Vegas. So I don't think you're going to put a team in Tahoe if you already own Vegas. So it's like you can start poking some holes in here and kind of see who's in, who's out. So like I said, if it is an ECHL owned team, I will be curious to see what city, because like I said, if it's a metro like Cincinnati, that's a pretty big get. And then you've already got Fishers, which is the suburb of Indianapolis. You got a strong foothold right there in the Rust Belt Midwest area.
Yeah, that would definitely be solid suggestions if you're looking at ECHL teams like you mentioned. Maybe the Kansas City Mavericks want to get into the IFL. You never know. We'll see. Definitely interested to see exactly who the 18th team is. I actually don't have any insight on this. I don't know if it's going to be Dakota. I don't know if it's another team entirely. I do know that there's been a lot of whispers that there could be some teams leaving the AFL. But at this point, I kind of take that all with a grain of salt because I'm not really sure. Any of these teams from the AFL know exactly what's going on for 2025. So I think a lot of them are kind of waiting out that scenario to see exactly what could happen. Could be a lot of big things coming for the league. In fact, one of the topics that we're going to discuss today, and I was intending to get to it before you came on, but no big deal.
Okay.
The AFL is considering possibly moving their season up to right after the Super Bowl. One of the thoughts for doing this would be the obvious benefits for players that are trying to elevate their careers. If you end your season earlier, it's more likely that these guys can latch on with the CFL team, which is obviously very conducive to the arena style of play. Or maybe they can latch on with an NFL team. And then you're also running concurrently with the UFL, which would be, in my mind, not necessarily the greatest idea, because then at that point you're kind of competing for viewers. But given the games are so much different, I don't necessarily know that it's going to be a direct one-for-one competition there. But I wanted to get your thoughts. Do you think it's a good move for the AFL to kind of move their season up so they're not necessarily competing with the IFL as long, or maybe they can get a good chunk of their season done before the IFL?
Yeah, I think it works a little bit better. I think the AFL did something like that back in their heyday in the mid to late 2000s and maybe even early 2000s. They started somewhere in February and March and kind of went that route. It depends on obviously how many weeks are going to be in their schedule, added teams, contracted teams. I mean, there's a whole bunch of variables that go along with it. But to get, like you said, to get done earlier in the summer to give players more chances at camps, whether it's to try and sign on in the CFL or the NFL preseason stuff or practice squads or what have you. I mean, it's definitely good. Whether it's the IFA, whatever it is, you're more well versed in that than I am. So I do like it, but at the same time, it does come with, right after the Super Bowl, people do get football fatigue. Like the casual fan gets football fatigue. Are you still going to be able to, latch onto those viewers when everyone kind of shifts their focus towards like college basketball and March Madness? That's always kind of been the issue.
Yeah, that's another thing as well as arena availability. You talk about, college sports going on and other sports as well, basketball, hockey, all that stuff. That's all something to factor in as well. I don't think that there's a lot of competing teams necessarily in those AFL markets in terms of hockey and basketball, but I'm not privy to all that information. It's just more to consider, more going on. But at the same time, people are more likely to be inside in the winter and want to spend time inside. So I think indoor sports are kind of more conducive to that winter time. Personally, obviously, you don't want to compete with the NFL. You'd want to wait till after the Super Bowl. But I could definitely see a scenario where maybe you start early, maybe you start like the week before the Super Bowl, and then you have, a couple games that bye a week when people are waiting for the Super Bowl to come. And then, maybe you just schedule around the Super Bowl, which would be tough, but that could be a way to kick off the season as well. Couple comments here I wanted to get to. Charles says, I like that. I liked when it was earlier in the year. First AFL game I ever watched was Super Bowl Sunday morning. That's interesting. Cody, that's a good point about fatigue. And then he says something I said was true. Charles, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Definitely make sure you hit that like button, share this with anybody who might enjoy it, and definitely continue to tune in because we got a little bit more to talk about. Did you see the news about Ozark Lunkers moving on from their general manager?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit. Like we talked in last week's episode, how they sent the article out or the press release out about how like it wasn't up to snuff or the season wasn't up to snuff. I don't know if that's necessarily going to fix things. Maybe it's been one season. You never know what your expectations are or anything like that. So I personally, I think it's a little premature, but time will tell.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit hasty to say the least. Obviously this is a first year team. You're giving him a year, or not even a full year to kind of build everything. I thought all these teams came out and looked respectable. And I know you never want to end a season on a 5 game losing streak. Never. It doesn't matter if you're a first year team, it doesn't matter. So obviously I can see that aspect to it, but at the same time, you didn't even really give him an opportunity to correct that. But then I wanted to say that he came out and handled this in the most professional manner I've ever seen. He put out a post on his personal Facebook and he essentially said, first of all, God is good in everything that he does. And he said, I wanted to thank the Ozark Lunkers for an opportunity. And he went through and personally pointed out all these different people that are involved in this organization and why you should continue to support them and why they're promising for the future. It was just a really professional thing to do on his end. And I think it was really well worded. So if you haven't checked that out, I'm not going to pull up the whole thing. It's pretty long. So go ahead and go check out his page on Facebook, Caleb Scott. Great write-up. And just a great shout out to the Ozark Lunkers because he could have handled this a different way, many different ways. He could have been upset. He could have bashed the team for not giving him a long-term opportunity. But at the end of the day, he understands the business. He understands that does him no good. Being positive, appreciating the chance to actually be in that position in the first place is what matters the most. And is going to reflect well for him getting future opportunities at that level, which I am positive this is not the last we have seen of Caleb Scott running a football team, whether it's his own or being a general manager for another team. Any quick thoughts on that before we move on to one quick IFL subject that I didn't touch on?
I think it's a classy gesture, not throw anyone under the bus. You take accountability, do whatever. And like we've talked in previous episodes, excuse me, there are 2 new Arena League teams that are coming to town. So, hey, if you can latch on to Eau Claire or Hot Springs, I mean, he's shown he has the experience and he can be the manager at one of those 2 and maybe get a little bit of revenge on Ozark. Who knows?
Absolutely. And that's not a bad way to look at it. And, I'd probably be applying for those teams if I were him as well. I actually heard that, Eau Claire is starting to do head coaching interviews. So very curious to see who ends up landing in both of those spots for coaching opportunities as well. Hopefully we see, some good coaches hired and some great foundations built for each of those cities. And we can see, the Arena League continue to thrive moving forward. The final piece of information, and it's more just a reactionary piece for the IFL. They recently started a fairly comprehensive jersey line, which I think is awesome. They're releasing the jersey collection for the first and second team all IFL, which is kind of like a replica jersey. And then they're also going to be selling championship game worn, actual jerseys, which I think is awesome. What do you think about these steps from the league in an effort to kind of grow their merchandise offerings for the fans?
From the marketing standpoint, I like it. From the jersey standpoint, I'm the contrarian. I'm not a huge fan of it. We watched the press conference last night, and I just don't like the uniforms, man. Like, I don't like the golden yoke that's over the shoulders of Massachusetts. I don't like the dashed lines. Like, I know it's a one-off game, but it's your championship game. Let the players wear the uniforms that they've worn all season. That's just my traditional old man yells at clouds kind of take. I understand why they're kind of doing this, and if they continue it into the future, since they got that deal with Adidas, and I can't remember the other brand that they're with that's part of that deal. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan, but if people are going to spend the money on it, that puts money in the Indoor Football League's pocket. They're not going to complain about that as much as, I can complain about jerseys or uniforms. If the league's making money on it, more power to them.
Exactly. Here are the jerseys that you can kind of purchase right now. They're definitely, limited time, all auction based. You can see the counters the timers counting down there. So definitely interested to see what kind of sales we see from this. This one looks like only 28 items left for the Rattlers. So it looks like the Rattlers fans are kind of outpacing the Pirates so far. And then there's only 8 jerseys left from the All IFL. I'd be curious how many players are purchasing their all IFL jerseys, whether to keep for themselves or give to family or something like that. Who knows? But definitely interesting, to look at some of these jerseys here, and we'll go ahead and pull up some of these. So D Hafford, $161 bid currently. I'm guessing that one's going to sell. Yeah, it's very interesting how they did these jerseys. I mean, I don't hate them. I don't hate the gold yoke. Personally, they are a little odd, but they're different. And then you have Arizona. Wow. Jamal Miles, $210. Shannon Brooks, $160. Dubes Jr., $185. Wow.
Yeah, if you go back to the Massachusetts one, how has no one bid on the Jimmy Robinson one? I'm going to go bid on that. No one has put money down on Jimmy Robinson?
It looks like nobody's put money down on a lot of these players. Matt Elam.
I'm going to go get that Jimmy Robinson jersey. My goodness.
Yeah, I mean, whoa. $1,000? What? That's crazy. Alejandro Benefield, $160. Green, $160. Branch. I mean, honestly, man, if you're getting anybody to buy a jersey for $1,000, you're doing good there. But Charles says, I'm with you, Cody. He's not a big fan. I don't like using different uniforms for the championship. I don't mind it on a theme night or something. I agree with that point. I personally would have liked to see them kind of play with their original jerseys in the championship, but I do understand the increased merchandise sales opportunities, and obviously it's working. We saw the numbers just now, so hopefully it brings in some money for the league, for the teams, and ultimately that trickles down to the players. Any final thoughts before we get out of here for the day? I know this one's kind of a short one, but short and sweet's never a bad thing.
I mean, you got a game at 3 o'clock today, and whether it's Arizona or Massachusetts winning it, someone's lifting a trophy today, and that pretty much concludes the indoor and arena season for 2024.
Absolutely. Don't cry too hard. I'm pretty upset about it myself. I wish there was another league for us to tune into, which there are a few other ones that are a little bit lower level than the IFL. So, if you're still looking to get that itch scratched by indoor football, don't hesitate to tune into some of these other leagues. They need our support just as much as the rest of them. But definitely excited to see the game tonight. Like you said, one way or another, we're getting a championship today, or a champion winner today, and it's going to be a great game. Arizona, Massachusetts, a little bit of a rivalry growing there. Saw what was it last season where there was the fans that climbed in the stands and stuff like that. So a lot of interesting backstory to this one for sure, and it wouldn't surprise me if it gets a little bit chippy. But definitely excited to see the game. And then, as always, make sure you go tune in and subscribe, like, comment on Cody's channel In the Alley on YouTube. If you have not caught his content, definitely go do it. I'm sure he won't sit here and talk up himself too much. He's kind of a humble guy, but I personally think he's one of the best IFL content creators out there. So definitely go check out all of his game previews, reviews. Really good information. I guaranteed you'll learn a lot in every single video. And on that note, we'll catch you guys next week for our championship game review live right here at 8 a.m. Eastern time. And then we'll probably, right off into the sunset of the IFL, AFL, NAL offseason. And we'll see you guys in a couple months when there's more information to talk about that's a little bit juicier than us just sitting up here giving our opinion on awards and stuff like that. But can't wait to see you guys in the next episode. And have a great rest of your weekend. And let's go Pirates.